Hello everyone. I want to thank you all for coming to the second focal event. I would like to thank our two speakers, Mrs. Pubali, Chakravorty-Campbell, and Ms. Sarah Holmes for joining us today. Just some fun facts about them before we start. Ms. Chakravorty-Campbell started the Bikram Yoga Studio in 2005 and was the studio was the subject of many newspaper and TV features. She now is a partner at HR Partner, or the Vice President of HR Partners in Manchester, I believe.
Concord and Dover.
Concord and Dover, sorry. She got her BA from BU in economics. And then we have Ms. Sarah Holmes. She is the director of Jeanne Shaheen's office.
State office, yeah.
In main office, the state office. She was the president of the UNH Democrats. In college. All right, would you want to start off and talk about yourself?
Wonderful. Well, thank you very much for having me here today. I am excited about this topic because I'm passionate about leadership, particularly about seeing people in the high school age demographic begin to value professional and personal leadership as something to carry from this point through college and after college into the career. A lot of people, in my experience, don't really look at leadership as a standalone topic until they get later on in their careers, and they may have to do it, or they find, they have their aha moment. Would you like me to start answering some of these questions now, or should Sarah introduce herself and then we can go back and forth?
Yeah, I mean, if you guys want to kind of start, introduce yourself, talk about your stories a little bit, and then we can move on to the Q&A.
Okay, super. So I will try to be brief.
Go for it.
I love that you shared with your audience that my background is unique. That is really where I come from in this type of discussion. I do have a BA in economics from Boston University. I went on to work for a small consulting company after I finished school with the objective of getting my MBA and going that corporate track. About 2 years into that time, I was approached by my uncle, who's the founder of this particular brand of fitness service called Bikram Yoga. And he said at that time, I'm going to offer you a choice. You can go the traditional route, or you can go the entrepreneurial path, which is harder. You're going to have more challenges, but you may find yourself enjoying the outcome a little bit more. And he knew me well enough to offer that to me. So I had to make a difficult decision. I am first generation Indian American. In my culture, you get your master's or your doctorate or your PhD. You don't stop everything and go into entrepreneurial life. But I enjoy a good challenge, and I like doing things that other people don't tend to do as easily. So I picked that path, and it's a long story, but the exciting piece is I had 15 incredible years as an entrepreneur, and very, very fortunate to have gone through many life cycles of the business. And today I'm able to use that information and leverage it to go back into consulting. I started in corporate, back in corporate, and I am very blessed to work at HR Partners as their VP of Business Operations and Org Dev. So that is my quick story. Yeah.
Nice. Well, thank you for having us. It's been a wonderful experience so far. You guys have been terrific in getting this set up, so we appreciate having us here. I think it's a good opportunity to speak with folks who are sort of just starting out, maybe deciding what they want to do on their path. And Andrew, I already know some of what you're passionate about from having met you when you came in to advocate in our office. So a little bit about my background. I'm from New Hampshire. I grew up in the southwestern part of the state in a small town called Charlestown. I went to a small public high school. It was 700 kids from 5 towns when I went there. So very small school, so you could easily be a little bit of a big fish in a small pond, which was good and bad in its own terms. I really enjoyed my time there at the school is called Fell Mountain. And part of what got me started on the path that I'm on today as someone who works in government and politics is that I was in student government when I was in high school, and so that was part of what got me interested. I was vice president of my class for all 4 years. I was a member of the Student Congress as part of that, but I was also someone who just tried to do everything. So I was someone who I played sports all 3 seasons. I always was on the honor roll, all of those things. Just trying, to always have good grades and just working really hard in high school, I think, is part of what my experience was. And you had asked if there were folks who sort of influenced my time in high school, and I would say definitely my family. My parents are very public service oriented. My mom was a member of the school board when I was growing up, so she was already active in that piece of government, so that was an example for me of volunteering and doing public service and giving back to your community. And my dad is a veteran. My grandparents were very active with the American Legion, so there was a lot of examples of public service in my family, which I think is part of what inspired me to do what I do now. And then I went to UNH, and I was a declared political science major from the very beginning. I knew that's what I wanted to do, and enjoyed my time there. I wish I could say it was a very intentional decision to go there. I will admit that it was not a very intentional decision to go there, but it worked out very well. Obviously, being the first in the nation political primary, I had an opportunity to do work on a number of campaigns, volunteer when I was in college, and really kind of got bit by the bug of campaigns. If any of you have ever volunteered for any folks who have run for office, I'm sure you can understand that it's a whirlwind and it's exciting, and there's all kinds of folks in town filming, looking for students to talk to, and so it was a great opportunity to get involved in that. And then my senior year I was president of the College Democrats, and when Senator Shaheen ran for Senate the first time and unfortunately did not win, but I still really enjoyed working on her campaign quite a bit, volunteering on her campaign, and so when I graduated I jumped right onto a political campaign. And from there it was all about networking and getting to know people. My first campaign that I worked on, some of those folks have just come out. They just finished up 8 years in the Obama administration. They were working in the White House. They were working in leadership at Health and Human Services. So it really prepared folks, I think, for a lot of those leadership roles. And what's nice is to have those folks to go back to and to talk to them and what their experiences are. And so I did poll them a little bit today before I came here to talk with you for some of their suggestions about leadership as well. But part of that was networking from the campaigns and getting to know people and keeping those connections with people, even when you finish with your campaign in New Hampshire and you're dispersed all over the country. But keeping up with those folks and keeping in touch with them, and it was remarkable to see how many of them really went into leadership positions in the Obama administration and continued to lead their own organizations or on issues that they're passionate about. So for me, politics was sort of that way to get into government service and working with people. And I've been fortunate to along the way to have been put into leadership positions and on campaigns. That can happen when you're very young and you have a lot of responsibility, and that's offers a lot of lessons in itself, and fortunately have grown into my current role with Senator Shaheen. I'm the state director. I oversee all of the staff we have here in New Hampshire and work closely with our Washington staff to craft policy down in DC to impact the lives of folks here in New Hampshire, and also to do a lot of one-on-one work with constituents in New Hampshire. So it's a wonderful job, and one that I think it's a great opportunity to work with a strong woman leader like Senator Shaheen, who is obviously a wonderful leadership example in her own right. So.
All right. Do you want to move on to the Q&A section?
Yeah, sure.
Got a lot.
Do you guys have any questions?
I don't have anything to ask so far.
All right. I was wondering, what was a time that you both failed, and what did it teach you, and what did you take away from it?
Oh gosh. How many minutes do we have to talk about it? I'll kick this off, and I'll start by saying, like you, Sarah, I had the opportunity to grow up in a household where community service, philanthropy, leadership were fundamental in home values and what was expected of me in the way that I lived my life as a student and then as a college student. And failure is a huge part of that. So when you put yourself out there and make yourself uncomfortable, whether you're doing community service work with people that are unfamiliar to you, or in a place where you feel out of sorts, or you're different from everybody else, you start to learn how it feels to fail. Because you fail when you go in with a particular expected outcome or a desired outcome, and if it doesn't happen, that's what most of us say is a failure. So as an entrepreneur and as in consulting, in all of the community work that I've had the privilege of doing, there's so many opportunities that come up to fail. You know, you set goals for a business, so certain dollars in revenue, you don't hit that goal. You go to a project with a desired, you know, outcome of building consensus amongst a group of people that are contentious, and they continue their contention, and you don't get to have the outcome that you want. So failure is very often, and I feel like failure, and I know this is a very kind of, bless you, a kind of a trendy thing to talk about is failure, but if you really look at what it is and what it feels like, all of the good stuff that happens to people in every age of their life comes out of those failures. And because you come out of it and you learn what you could have done better and differently, what you couldn't have done better and differently, and what things are out of your control.
Well, having started my political career with 3 losing campaigns, definitely have had my share of failures, and obviously that's a much larger organization, but every little bit within those organizations counts. So, you know, it's obviously disappointing. I mean, the first race that I volunteered on was the Gore Lieberman race in 2000. So that was really hard one to lose. And then, you know, worked for Senator Shaheen on her race in 2002. And then the more personal one was when I worked for Governor Dean's primary campaign in 2003, because we were the front runner and doing so well and everything was going great, and then everything just changed on a dime. And it's not within your control, but you still have to make sure that you're, you know, out there reaching out to your supporters. So, I mean, that was a tough lesson to just sort of accept, okay, this is big, you know, sometimes it's just bigger than you, and you can't do anything. It's out of your control. I mean, in this case, for a political campaign. But you know, there are always some silver linings. I think that from the organization that we built from Governor Dean's campaign in 2003, you know, flash forward to 2006 when we took back, you know, Democrats won the New Hampshire State House, and we elected the first woman to Congress from the 1st Congressional District, and a lot of that, I think, was built on some of the networks that we had built during the Governor Dean's presidential primary race. So there was a silver lining on it. It took a little bit longer to reveal itself, but, you know, after that 2006 race, I had been living in Boston, and I came back up here to work for Congresswoman Shea Porter because I was so excited to have, you know, elected a woman to Congress, and that was a wonderful experience and helped get me where I am today. So a little bit longer payback, I think, but to your point, you know, those are valuable lessons. I think really hard in the short term often, but in the long term, just it's all a building block to get you where you're going to be later in life. So, yeah.
I have a question. How do you both feel as women who have been very successful individuals in each of your careers? How do you feel in terms of has being a woman set any setbacks for you in getting to your end point or where you're at now? Do you feel as though that's been somewhat of a challenge, or because unfortunately, while things are changing, you tend to see more men in very or I guess like politics, you tend to see more men, and entrepreneurs, you tend to see more men. I think has been my experience.
That's a good question. Yes, I would say yes to one aspect of it. Have I noticed bias? Have I been on the receiving end of a lot of silly behavior? Absolutely. I think Sarah and I could both tell all of you out there on TV the stories that would curl your hair. They happen. That said, when I go into anything, whether I'm going into doing work for a client, or I'm coming to speak to a group, or I'm at a community event, I always go in aware that there could be people that are going to not listen to me or not value what I have to say because of my gender, my race, my ethnicity. In the back of my head, I'm aware. But I will tell you with a great degree of confidence that in my career, I have never let that influence anything that I do. And I love advising people and recommending to people that if you go in looking for something, you will find it.
Right.
You will find it. If I go in looking for that one guy who's not going to pay attention to me because I'm a woman, I'll find him. But what benefit is that to me? Does that give me? It doesn't offer me anything. There's no winner. You know, it's a zero-sum game. So for young women that are choosing whether or not they're going to become a leader, entrepreneur, executive, someone who is spearheading political campaigns, to not choose that path because of what is today still an inequity and imbalance does her no favors. But rather, if she goes in with eyes wide open and looks to build consensus and educate, she's going to have a much more positive experience because she's staying on the positive track.
And you think just by doing you, just being successful and being yourself, you are educating them rather than needing to, I guess, call them out? I don't know.
That's such a great question. The majority of the time, yes. You know, actions will always speak louder than words. Always. Now, I started out by sharing that I can tell you all stories, as Sarah will too, that will curl your hair, that will shock you. And you will not believe that we live in this time, in this era. You would think we're all back, you know,
1800s,
in Middle Ages. When those events occur, you have to look within and ask yourself a question: is this juice worth the squeeze? Do I see value in taking time to bring something to this person's attention, educate them, and hold them accountable to their ignorance, or not? And in many times in my life, Sarah, I'm sure it's the same.
Not worth it.
It's not worth it. It is just not worth it. Whereas in other times in my life, as a women's rights activist, I've been, you know, this has been my thing for my whole career, is women's rights, equal rights, that and human rights. That there are certain times where you do have to put yourself out there at risking everything and saying no, 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 and here's why. But every single time you engage on the subject, if you take that stance, it may not give you the result that you're looking for. So you really do, in my opinion, need to pick and choose.
Yeah, I mean, I would say there has to be some recognition that being a woman in leadership too is always going to be a little bit harder, just because people make certain assumptions about you that you can't control. But to your point, you know, actions speak louder than words. So if you're there for the discussion, whatever it is, and you show up and you're well prepared and you're well spoken, you know, I think that's always going to be helpful. I mean, Sarah Shaheen and I would talk about, you know, she tells a story about when she first started in the New Hampshire State Senate. She would go home at night with a binder full of reading material for the hearings she had the next day in order to be well prepared for her, you know, briefings or whatever, you know, the meetings she had. And her counterparts would come in and just ask questions, and without, you know, briefing materials and things like that. But she, you know, she felt like she needed to do that to just be prepared for the discussion. So I think there's certain aspects of that. I mean, to her point, you know, I have made myself a couple pages of notes today to come in and talk with you all to make sure I was prepared to talk about that. So, I mean, I think there's always going to be some of that involved, and because, you know, I have an example about my friend Allison, who went and got her PhD in politics, and, you know, she and I were chatting after she had received her degree, and I said, you know, congratulations. And she said, this is so much harder than I thought it was going to be, because I had to make decisions about having a family and when I wanted to do that, and that my male counterparts just didn't have to make that consideration. And so, you know, I think it's just always going to be a a thing to take into consideration. But I definitely would not let that slow you down. If you know, people are always going to make those kinds of assumptions, you know, whatever it is about you, but all you can do is do the best you can do, show up, come prepared, and be engaged and be an active participant. So.
Yeah, your point about family was actually kind of what I was referencing, because my mom has always talked to me about this as something that she struggled with, because I'm one of 6, so granted she went all the way with the whole family. But it's been hard for her to try to balance family with her career.
Yeah.
And it's something that my dad obviously hasn't had to struggle with as much.
And people probably don't ask him about it.
Right.
Where they would ask a woman. I just had Senator Jeanne is the ship sponsor for the USS Manchester, which is being commissioned in Portsmouth next month. And so Commander Emily Bassett, who is the commander of the ship, she's the first woman commander of a littoral combat ship. She came and we had a dinner with other women in leadership, Senator Jeanne and a few other folks, to talk about just you know, experiences and how their lives had been impacted by that. And so she said, people always ask her, gosh, how do you do it? You know, she has 2 children, and her husband, who's a former Navy pilot, is a stay-at-home dad. But, you know, the assumption is like, well, how are you going to make this work for your career? Whereas if it was a man, that wouldn't even be a question. It would just be like, oh, you're an officer in the Navy, great, you know. So she's lucky that she has that family support system. But it's just a different, you know, it was an interesting conversation about what people would say to her versus what they would, you know, say to maybe a male counterpart.
Yeah.
It is that you just, you know, if you appreciate going into it that you're going to be questioned, and you're going to get silly questions like that, and the motivation for a lot of those silly questions is not always a bad one. I mean, it's a genuine respect for motherhood, a respect for the person who's asking the question, maybe reflecting on his or her own childhood and the fact that the mother did this and this, and to them the definition of correct is mother can't be away 9 to 8 every day or 9 to 5, and so it's educating them that, you know, we have now tools and resources and dynamics in relationships where I can be a high performer, my husband can be a high performer, but it's not at the cost of our child. And you know, it's interesting, Sarah, you said something about assumptions. The thing about professional life is no matter who you are, someone is always going to be making some assumption about you, about something. And when I was reflecting in my mind about what was it that I wanted to talk to this group about, I wanted to share this thing about assumptions, because I have my personal career, I'm sure you have too, Sarah, always have worked around other people's assumptions, right? So people assuming that I'm not fit for some leadership, or, you know, being an executive or doing this or that because I'm a woman, because I don't have a traditional background, because I don't have an MBA, so those are the assumptions people draw often about me. My husband, who is a male, who is, you know, Caucasian male, he's going to be, is on the receiving end of assumptions as well that are unfair and unreasonable for him. So the interesting thing about leadership is you have to be brave in the face and educate people about the silly assumptions that they make about you, because they're looking at you through their lens and not any other. You know, so I'm so glad you used that word, assumptions. Yeah.
Well, and I think being a woman too, you already have so many natural leadership abilities because you're, you know, leading your family. You're, you know, it's a natural fit, even though it doesn't always seem like it is. Yeah. You know, you have, you know, already most of us have sort of more, have those caring and nurturing tendencies that you sometimes need when you're, you know, working with people, and that can help move an issue forward when, you know, just the sort of like brash approach isn't going to work. So, you know, don't let those be a drawback for you, because I do think that they're assets in you know, being a woman in leadership.
I've worked with men before that say, "Oh, I'm glad you're here, because you're bringing a lady's touch or feminine touch," and I could be upset about that, but instead I go, you know what, you're right. You know, this is a unique skill set that we'll celebrate it. Let's celebrate it.
But at the same time, you know, you can be kind, you can be firm, and be confident.
Exactly.
So it's a balance.
I was also wondering, so you both said that kind of community service was a big part of it. are there any other activities, and if not, how did community service impact you as a leader now?
Oh, gosh, so many different ways. So when I reflect on community service, I think everyone should start their community life in a way that touches the people that you're helping. You know, so I've gone through in my career, I've gone through in my life, the starting as a volunteer at the nursing homes and volunteer at different, you know, shelters, this and that, working up the food chain as my career moved along into being on boards, sitting on boards, retiring from boards and going back into the community. That experience is educational in a lot of ways because it exposes you to things that you would normally not otherwise be exposed to. And it connects you with aspects of life that you may not be, and I will say, privileged to know. It is not a privilege to be homeless. It's not a privilege to be in a shelter. It's not a privilege to be hungry. It's not a privilege to be in a nursing home or somewhere where you don't have as much family supporting you. But when I was privileged to go in and witness it, it opened my eyes to injustices that exist in this world and motivated me to want to spend time and resources to help stop it. So that is where I feel that community work is so important, is it sheds light on things where those of us that are blessed and have food, shelter, family, etc., if we don't go looking for those opportunities, we will not know what's out there for others.
Agreed. I mean, I'd spend some time, you know, when I was younger volunteering in food shelves, and we would do different activities with the Honor Society or whatever it was. And even now at work, sometimes, you know, we'll try and incorporate community service into, you know, whether it's the day we have for the holiday party or whatnot, just recognizing that, you know, there are people that are less fortunate. And like you said, I think it really gives you a different perspective on sort of what's going on, what else is going on in your community, because you may not have those experiences in your life, but other people do. And it's important to recognize that we need to find a way to help them and bring them up. And I think it connects you with your community to help you see who those people are that are doing that kind of, you know, hands-on human service work, because those are some of the hardest working people we know, and so often little recognized, and they need volunteers. They really, you know, that's what keeps those organizations going. So I think it's really important to have that experience and to sort of just have that perspective.
And education. If you go and volunteer for refugee communities or New Americans, you're going to learn about cultures and food and language and dress that you would not ever see otherwise. And if you go to the nursing homes and the facilities that are long-term care, you're going to sit and speak with people that have seen and heard things that we only read about, but they were there. You know, so if we don't go and do those things, you will never again. They're living treasures, you know, our older community, going and helping them, you know, and refugees and those that are not, they don't look like us, are just wealth of information and inspiration.
Sorry, I have another question. So the reason that I started this was because I attended a program that wasn't my style of leadership. And I think from that experience, I kind of learned that we all have a different definition of what a leader is. So what is each of your, I guess, personal definition of a leader?
Sure, that's a great
Qualities of a
question.
leader.
Yeah. I believe that leaders are people who are not living a life that's centric on them. That they look at a challenge or a group or whatever it is that they're, you know, Tanya and I are a team, or we're here as a group, and we look at this and say, where are we trying to go? How are we going to get there? Why is that our destination? And then collaborate as equals with the group to move that community or whatever that herd is to that right direction. You know, to me, leaders are kind, they're compassionate. They don't need to look a certain way. I don't think that somebody that has a double PhD is automatically a leader because they have a double PhD. I don't think someone who has spent their whole careers in working in a nonprofit necessarily automatically qualifies to be a leader because of that either. To me, a leader is someone who's made it their mission to get people from one place to another successfully happy and with the resources that they've got. And I could go on and on about it, and I won't, but leadership to me is a risk that you take. It's an enormous risk because people put all their eggs in your basket. So you have to also be a bit of an adventurer and willing to have some hard times.
I would say to a commitment and dedication to that goal, whatever it may be, for your organization or your volunteer group. Someone who's compassionate, who's a good listener, because you'll have to take into consideration, the thoughts of lots of different viewpoints, and someone who's inspiring, because just because you say you're a manager, if people aren't following you, you're not necessarily a leader, Right. So you have to inspire people to want to, work with you on your goal and be as committed as you are, and show that dedication to either the project or the the end goal or whatnot. I think that's important to keep in mind when you're thinking of people who are leaders. Are they inspiring people? Because even if you're just you can say your title can be director, but if people don't want to work with you, then
I have a master's in leadership.
right,
Yeah,
exactly.
So.
Yeah.
As both of you have experienced a lot of success in your career, and you're both well educated, which is something that we're on the brink of.
You're already there.
You're already on a good path. Yeah, absolutely.
Long way to go, but what would you say has been your biggest challenge in getting to the point where you're at?
Academically or just professionally?
A mix of both. To in your career, I
Yeah.
guess. But it could be academically as well,
Yeah.
in studying.
That's a good question. The biggest challenge?
Yeah, that you've overcome.
Yeah, so for me it has been satisfying other people's definition of correct. So again, my background, I'm very lucky, I worked very hard, all of that, blah, blah, blah. But I also have a path that is unusual in a lot of ways, right? I went to Boston University on a scholarship for biochemistry, molecular biology, pre-med. Within my first semester, I was going to flunk Orgo. Not because I didn't try, but because it was very hard for me and I just wasn't able to get through that. And I looked at that, and that was an inspirational experience for me, that why is this happening? But I realized that we all have a talent. We all have a set of skills that are unique to us, that no matter where we are, what we're doing, we always tend to find success in a certain area. So for me, my challenge was to try and make a life, a career, out of being good at communication, relationship management, leadership, consensus building, all of these what are often referred to as soft skills, which and I was telling a client earlier this morning, if you really want to see me grow some hackles, talk to me that certain skills are soft skills, because all skills are skills. But my challenge was that, again, in my culture and what my family expected of me, making a career from those types of skills was not as exciting or as agreeable as continuing in the pre-med path that my family wanted me to be on. So over the course of my success and time, and I say success lightly, I mean, I'm proud of my achievements, and there are many people more successful than me, but it has been being faithful and committed to knowing what I'm good at, and continuously trying to be creative in ways to leverage those skills, to learn more, and then to find opportunity. And I have been able to do that. And the challenge has been not listening to other people's definition of correct.
I would say early on it was definitely having the confidence in myself that I was put in your position for a reason. They've selected you to be a leader for a reason, and so using that in my decision making and not second guessing myself. I think women tend to do a lot of that, and so for me it was important to understand what everyone does in the office. So I know what your role is, I know how to do it, and I can answer the questions that you're coming to me with. So that, I think that was part of it, and over time that really dissipated. It was just sort of growing into it and understanding that, having the background, and I think this comes from the preparation piece that I was talking about earlier, that, I always felt like I needed to do more preparation to understand, all of the aspects of a situation, and you're never going to have all of that. So trusting your gut a little bit and being confident that you're going to make the right decision, and if you don't, you'll know how to sort of, what you need to do to fix it. So I think that was a battle, for myself, a challenge early on, especially being such a young person in campaigns. So they put you in a leadership role and you're like, oh, I don't know, am I doing this right? But you have to have confidence in yourself and pick a direction. And if it doesn't end up being the right direction, then you gotta have, you can change course. But you you have to have confidence in yourself, and I think that's often a challenge for women. Yeah.
So how do you know what direction you want to go in? 'Cause I mean, for both of your fields, whether it's being an entrepreneur, campaigning, or being in a political position, you need to kind of have a vision for what you want to accomplish. How do you come up with a vision?
Well, I mean, if you're on a campaign, usually the goal is to, you've got a vote goal,
Yeah.
so you're sort of working towards that total. But you do have to be creative about how you get to it. Obviously, there are certain tools within a campaign that you're going to use. And for for the senator's office, our goal is to meet Senator Shaheen's priority, which is that our number one priority is assisting constituents. So anyone who calls into our office gets a response within 24 to 48 hours, and we try to always solve their problems. And so often we have to use sort of creative thinking if we're not getting the answer, if we're not getting a resolution to the case that we're hoping for. We have to all sort of put our heads together to find out what that is. So I think there's, in my job anyway, there are always some specific routes you're going to take to try and get there, but there's also outside the box thinking in terms of how do we reach out to constituents who maybe, folks who aren't on the internet, or what else can we put on social media so we'll get more people following us so they can see what Senator Shaheen is working on in the Senate for everyone, for her constituents. So I think for me anyway, just in my specific role, there are some definite routes to get there, but it does take creative thinking, and you have to be able to sort of go back to your team on that to get there.
So you used the word vision. And if you look at a lot of organizations, including political campaigns, which is a business of its own, right? Businesses often have things called vision statements, mission statements, value statements. And the reason why these are so important is you will be distracted from your vision. When that distraction occurs, we must always look inwards and remind ourselves of what is our mission, what are our values. We all have them. So we, whether we are representing ourselves or we're representing an organization or someone else, we must always have some connection to what it is that we're, why are we trying to get there? How do we plan on getting there? And does it match my value? So if I am on a path and I have this path coming this way, and I'm working in the way that I'm working with our clients and my colleagues, and someone comes in from the side and says, Pubali, I know that this is your vision, but I'm going to offer you $275,000 a year to satisfy my vision. Come and work for me. Come and do my bidding, right? Because it's my vision and I want to pay you for it. And at that moment, and this happens to professionals all the time, it's a crisis, right? Because there's an opportunity in some ways, but that opportunity may distract you, divert you from your vision. And so at that moment, you have to go, why was I going this way to begin with? Was it because of this money? Was it because of the power? So I know that's kind of a nebulous, esoteric concept, but the short answer to your question is you need to know why you have that vision to begin with. And if you're connected to that reason, then it's not going to be easy for someone to distract you.
What is the biggest thing that each of you have taken away from your experience so far?
Professionally or with all of you fine people today?
Professionally, over the years.
Gosh.
It could be a life lesson or a more...
Yeah. Never let someone else underestimate you. Never underestimate yourself. And so don't let people underestimate you. Also, don't let yourself underestimate yourself, because there's going to be plenty of people trying to do that for you.
Yep.
So you have to be confident. Stick with your values, stick with your vision. And that's what I've learned. I've learned that I know what I'm passionate about, I know what I believe I'm good at. I ask questions, I get feedback. But at the end of the day, I know what I know, and I've learned not to let people distract me from that. That's been a lesson. I mean, there's been 100 million lessons, but that's one big one that comes up for me.
Yeah. I think just don't be afraid to take a seat at the table. You know, your input is valuable from your perspective, and you know, if you're not stepping up, someone else is. So, you know, why not you? If you have the passion and the drive and the interest in doing it, you should absolutely, you know, step up and put yourself out there. It is hard, and it'll be, I think, scary at times, but if you're not sort of reaching for the next thing, you know, you're sort of getting stuck. So you really need to keep pushing yourself to learn more and in an organization, or to learn more, you know, about whatever it is that you're passionate about. And I think too, you have to do what you love. You know, if you're stuck doing something that you're not interested in, you're not quite passionate about, I mean, there's always going to be a job that you're going to have to take that's like, well, this isn't quite what I want to do, but you're going to learn something from it, and it's a stepping stone in getting to where you want to be. But you have to really be interested in what you're pouring your heart into, you know, otherwise I think you'll just get burned out, and that's never a good situation. So,
can I add a corollary to mine? Also, don't underestimate others.
yeah.
Don't make assumptions about other people, because you just don't know. You don't know their story. So until you know someone's story, make zero assumptions. And that's easy to say, it's hard to do in the moment. But on another show, another meeting, we can talk all about amazing people you meet that you think something and then you learn and you go, holy mackerel.
Yeah.
I had no idea that my cab driver is a brain surgeon.
Right.
You know, I had, you know, which is real stories.
Yeah.
You know. So the world is really funny that way. There's a lot of exciting things to dig up if you're willing to spend the time on it.
Do you have any questions, Katie?
I actually was wondering, are there any pieces of like common advice or wisdom that you found to just be untrue in your careers?
Oh, common advice that's untrue?
It's untrue.
Yes, I will give you one. I know you're going to see a theme, but the untrue piece of advice is that there's a right way of going through your professional life, right? Because maybe you've heard differently, but I hear this all the time. People look for the traditional path: elementary school, middle school, high school, college, master's, this. And a lot of times people are very linear. And they say that if you have these unusual experiences that you're not qualified for this. And you know, so that is my answer to your question, is what is right to be successful? There is no one answer to that.
No.
There's no one path that's right for everyone. So if anyone ever tells you that the only way you're ever going to be this, and this, question it. You can't do brain surgery or open heart surgery without a surgical license. You can't dispute that one. But you can dispute that if you want to fly jets, that you have to be this, and this, otherwise don't even bother. So I'm not giving you great examples, but that would be the one big one.
I agree with that, and I think you can always reinvent yourself.
Yeah.
If you're kind of not, you've run out of passion for what you're working on, and you really want to try something new, I think, you know, dive in and try something new, because just because you spent this amount of time doing this and you think you should continue on with it, if it's really not fulfilling you and it's not, you're not excited about it and excited to get up and work on that problem or that issue or that challenge every day, then change course.
Sarah, maybe you agree with this one or not, I don't know. The other one that I really like, now that you asked that excellent question, is I don't think there's a relationship with how long someone's been doing something and they're good at it.
Yeah, mastery.
Yeah.
Can take varying amounts of
Exactly.
time.
I mean, that's one thing. Well, I've been doing this for 30 years. You can do something wrong for 30 years. You know, so that assumption or that kind of rule that people place on, oh, we can't, long time. Well,
doesn't always
work out that way.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
So if you were to talk to yourself as a junior or senior in high school, what would you tell yourself? What's that, yeah, I wish I would have known?
Junior or senior in high school?
Oh, well, Andrew's already done it. I was going to say go broad. I think that's such an eye-opening experience and something I didn't get to do in college, unfortunately, and really wish that I had. So if I could go back, I would make sure I had done that and just had some more travel experiences, I think, in my life and when I was younger. I wish I had done that a little bit more.
I don't know how many. There's so many. I mean, I have personal ones. You know, I think about being a junior or senior in high school and not keeping in the back of my head that parents and relatives don't live forever. You know, I think that young people, as a young person, you forget that you are young, but your family is not. You know, you don't see your parents as, you know, I lost a parent at a young age to cancer. So I think that's where my automatic answer, Tanya, goes to, if I knew then what I knew now, I would have had a would have made very different choices than I did. But now those opportunities are gone because I've lost that parent, you know. So that's definitely one. The other one is the whole make yourself uncomfortable. Put yourself out there, Pubali.
Absolutely.
You know, don't stay comfortable in your clique. Oh yeah, I had the whole thing, prom this and what is it, the prom court and all that stuff. But yeah, but to go out there and be as uncomfortable as you can be. Yeah. That is what I would love to tell
try
myself.
New things.
Yeah.
Even if they're hard and you don't do well at them.
Yeah.
Just try it.
Yeah.
You know?
Think about the future. Every decision you make, think about what's going to happen to me 5, 10, 15 years down the road.
It can be daunting.
I have an add-on to that question. So social media probably didn't exist to the extent it does now.
At all.
Didn't exist at all. Yeah.
What have you seen as your professional career has grown, some of the frequent missteps that the younger leaders are making or assumptions that younger individuals that want to grow into leadership roles, some accidents they're making? And what advice would you have?
Yeah, I you know, Senator Shaheen has several social media pages and people are never shy to share their opinion on things, whether it's appropriate or not, and it's absolutely their prerogative to do that. But I think how you come across on social media, people, you know, bosses who are hiring people, you're Googling people, you're looking them up to see what they've got on their Facebook page or their Instagram or whatever it is. So you have to be careful of that stuff because that's a snapshot to the outside world. So you should be really, really careful with that stuff just because it will follow you. I mean, hopefully that's not a mistake that folks have made, but I think it can put questions in people's minds where they don't need to be.
So as a mother of an 11-year-old daughter who has now a cell phone for security reasons, so I don't worry, I can get a hold of her, I keep telling Madeline to remember that it's very easy to sit behind a screen and to project onto the world an artificial reality that you want people to believe. And whether that is Facebook nonsense or Snapchat or whatever she's doing, which she doesn't really, is not allowed to do, but their friends are doing, that, and it's the same information I would give to grown-ups, right?
Yeah.
I can scroll through, and I don't do it often, I kind of quit all of that, but and I see all this stuff, and I sometimes react. I feel things. Like I feel like I need to do those things too, because all the cool kids are doing it. And then I realize maybe they're just lying and they really didn't do it.
It's not real life.
It's not
Yeah.
real life. Yeah. So just be mindful that that is not reality
Yeah.
for most people, and to be careful about making life decisions based on something that you can't touch.
Right. Or that you think other people are
Yeah.
doing and may not necessarily be real.
Yeah.
Is there a piece of advice that you guys could give us?
Just one?
Well,
Just kidding. Oh, yeah. First of all, it's more than advice. It's congratulations that you're doing this. It's so awesome. It is so awesome. Good luck with this organization, because what you're doing is, I only wish that I had this opportunity in high school. I was in Model UN and all that stuff. Awesome, but not leadership centric at that time. The advice is to not lose sight of who you are. Under any circumstances that somebody wants you to change, somebody wants you to do something you're not comfortable with, and that's not who you are, that saying no is the greatest gift you can give yourself, or saying yes might be the greatest gift you can give yourself. But just stay true to your whatever your personal vision is.
And I would say, always be curious. Always keep your curiosity, and when you're thinking about your career path, really try and seek out a mentor who has similar interests in you, and is someone that you can, speak with about what your interests are, what your passions are, where you want to be, and how you can get there, because that's really invaluable, I think, as you're starting out on a career, is finding someone who can truly, who knows you, who you've worked with, and who can help guide you, because that's really an invaluable resource. So definitely, if you have someone, it could be a teacher, maybe it's someone that, maybe it's your parent, maybe it's a family friend, but finding someone, and you can have different mentors throughout your life as you're sort of in your different stages, but I think having that someone to bounce things off of and provide you with some perspective is really invaluable.